Well, that wasn't a very good weekend for your Toronto Raptors. Two games, a combined 59 points in the red against the Charlotte Hornets and Atlanta Hawks, a pair of really important opponents. How worried should you be about various aspects of the Raptors' play right now? We're going to dig into that question regarding Fred VanVleet's health, OG Anunoby's health, the overall state of the half-court defense and the half-court offense. Just the whole defense in general. Transition was stinky too over the weekend. We're going to dig into all of those questions and more on today's episode of Locked On Raptors with Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com. Thanks for being here.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1127, I think, of Locked On Raptors for Monday, February the 28th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the show at Locked On Raptors. And, of course, you can find links to every single episode of the podcast. Wherever it is you get your podcast, you can go follow, subscribe, rate, review, etc. It's much appreciated. You can also go to YouTube and subscribe to the show over there. Hit the big red subscribe button. It is much appreciated. Thanks to all those who have already done it. And thank you in advance if you are planning on making the leap to YouTube shortly here as well. And as always, a big thank you for making us your first listen of the day. All right, on today's show, woof, really rough weekend for your Toronto Raptors. On Friday night in Charlotte, a 125-93 loss that was never close. And then a game in Atlanta on Saturday that was close until like the middle of the second quarter. And then it was also never close, losing 127-100 to Trae Young and his merry band of Atlanta Hawks. And joining me now to pick up the wreckage and to play a little game we're going to call the Worry Meter, running through some elements of the Raptors game, grading them on a scale of 1 to 5 as to how worried we are about them potentially derailing the whole operation. It is, of course, Big V, Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com. Big V, how are you, pal?
I'm doing well. Happy circumstance. Surprised this doesn't happen more often. I'm wearing my Locked On shirt today.
Woo! It's beautiful.
So, hey, I
love the brand synergy. It's fantastic. I'm not wearing mine, and my toque is in the other room because my fiance cleaned up my office, and all of my stray hats are not lying around anymore. So I can't throw mine on for brand synergy, but thank you for wearing the shirt.
Oh, no problem. I mean, like I said, I'm surprised it hasn't happened once yet, but here we are. Got it on. We've got that together. Hopefully the Raptors will get their ish together soon enough, and we can get used to watching some winning basketball.
That would be nice. I should say, since we got to video on the podcast, which is now like 6 or 7 months, it's been a while. I feel like I have been rotating like the same 5 or 6 shirts over the course of the time. It's like, oh yeah, it's Orange Hoodie Day. No, there's there's Denver Nuggets Hoodie Day. I feel like I don't have enough clothes for a daily video podcast, so please bear with me. I have
I like the
clothes, everybody, but I like my staples. I don't know what to say. Hoodies are nice in the wintertime. My apartment's cold as hell. You'll get some better floral prints on t-shirts in the summer. Anyway, let's continue.
How would I know it's a Wednesday if you're not wearing your Nuggets hoodie?
That's a good point. It is. It's a classic Wednesday staple. It's like, maybe I should just assign days of the week, just for that comfort for the listeners. Who's to say? We'll workshop that. But let's get to the meat of today's show. Big V, the Toronto Raptors have lost 2 games in a row. 3 of their last 4 they've lost by a whole bucket load of points. They have now fallen down to 15th in offense, 15th in defense, just a plus 0.6 net rating, right in line with sort of a 500-ish team, which is not what you want. So I guess we got to just sort of try to pick through the parts here. We're not going to go through the play-by-play of the 2 games on Friday and Saturday because they were awful games. Just truly awful. If you were watching the second half, we did it because it's our jobs. I'm not going to lie. On Saturday, in the back part of the game against the Hawks, I flipped over to the Leafs game because it was like 10-7 and it was awesome. And I was having a great time. It was a great decision. But we did slog through these games. We're just going to kind of pull some bigger bits from it, though, and examine 6 different questions that potentially are signs of worry for your Toronto Raptors. And we're going to grade as to how worried we are about those things. So let's begin, shall we, with our first thing on the list. It is, how worried are you about Fred VanVleet's health. He's, of course, played the last 2 games, but he missed some time, obviously, before the All-Star break with that knee soreness. He played in the All-Star game, came back, and it does not seem to have gone away entirely. It seemed like at the start of the Hawks game on Saturday in particular, like, oh, maybe he's back. Maybe he's finding his groove and things are all right. And then as the game went along, it just kind of looked a little bit more labored and slow, and the burst isn't quite there. And that is having all sorts of ramifications for both sides of the floor for the Raptors. So, Big V, Fred VanVleet is questionable for tonight against the Nets. Obviously, a really big game with Brooklyn still looking back at the Raptors, and they're not going to be without Kevin Durant and Ben Simmons forever, you would assume. So you want to pick up these 2 wins tonight and tomorrow if you can. But how worried are you from a scale of 1 to 5 about Fred VanVleet and his overall health?
I'll put this one at a healthy 4.
Yeah.
I think going back to the trade deadline when we were previewing it and discussing it, I was kind of like, in terms of my hierarchy of needs, the point guard depth moved ahead of a center, because I was worried about Fred VanVleet's body, and I keep getting flashbacks to the 2015 playoffs and Kyle Lowry going up against those Wizards and getting swept, and him having to do so much in the regular season that he had nothing left. And it feels like an eerily similar pattern. And so hopefully, despite the fact that there wasn't any real help acquired for him specifically at the trade deadline, there is a way that he can manage his body. I think, coming out of this stretch will be a big telltale sign, because you've got 6 and 8. How many of those he plays, and if he plays all of them, and he's struggling through it, that is probably not going to bode well for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, I would have probably put this one at like a 3.5. But your invoking of the 2014-15 Toronto Raptors and Kyle Lowry's slow decline into rubble that season has got me pretty scared, man. I'm going to go with a 4.5 on this one, because, yeah, like they need what Fred VanVleet provides, and there's no one else on the roster who can offer it, right? Like, he offers really good point of attack defense, unless Trae Young is sizing him up. And boy, oh boy, do they not have any answers for Trae Young, which we'll get to with our next question. And I think there's like Trae Young tie-ins into how we picked apart the Raptors in that one. But as far as Fred, yeah, it's just hard to envision a pathway for this team winning, the 44, 45, 46 games we were hoping they could win at this point, without Fred VanVleet playing at something close to 100%, because there's just, as much as we've talked about how there's an increased margin for error these days because there's more than 4 or 5 guys playing well, that's kind of dissipated in the last couple of games here. I still believe in most of the guys to come back around to form here, but like, there's just no one who can replicate what Fred does. And I am like, what do you make of the fact that Malachi Flynn's gotten, over the course of the last 2 games, 12 and 19 minutes? That is 31 minutes altogether. I just did math on the fly, baby. He hasn't been terribly effective in those minutes. He was 2 of 10 against the Hawks. And, obviously a big product of garbage time is a lot of those minutes. But do you kind of maybe envision Flynn as maybe this sort of break glass in case of emergency backup point guard that they might go to here? Obviously, Pascal's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, but then you get into the question of, is that too much of a burden to put on him? Where do you think Flynn kind of sorts into this in terms of helping to offset the load that Fred VanVleet's been carrying all season long?
Well, first off, I'll say Malachi, maybe the raw stats don't show it, but I think from a process standpoint, he's been doing some good things. Sure. And then in terms of the backup guard situation, I think that just has more to do with the score line than anything else. And yeah, if you're down 30 in the fourth, you're probably better off getting Fred some rest, knowing the situation with his knee. So
how did he play 35 minutes on Saturday? What? 4.5. I stand by my 4.5.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, anything under 40 is a win. So, yeah, I feel like, in a normal situation where the Raptors are competing and are in the final stages of the game, you're probably not going to see Flynn even get to, 5 minutes probably. So I think that was just more of a situational thing. And yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the Fred situation plays out.
Yeah, as far as Flynn, like I can see him maybe filling in sort of the off-ball side of the role a little bit, right? Like that's what they brought him in for in that Wolves game, right? They were getting killed by the zone, and he just offers some sort of theoretical shooting, and so it kind of worked. Even though he did, I don't think he scored in that stretch, but he was useful process-wise. You mentioned like pretty helpful. So I could see him filling in for that role a little bit, but in terms of the on-ball creation, like it's just not. He doesn't have the same shot-making acumen. You would hope that he can one day, because that's sort of how he's going to make his bones in the NBA, but. Haven't seen it so far. And yeah, the Fred thing, I'll, not to sort of spoil the rest of the podcast, but I do think this is sort of the biggest lingering threat to a successful close to the season for the Raptors is Fred VanVleet's health. I don't think it's close as it stands right now. And so, I've set up it's 4.5 to begin with. We're going to de-escalate and kind of calm down as the rest of the show goes. Maybe you won't. Maybe you're more worried about some other things. But for me, Fred VanVleet's health is clearly number one for me. We're going to continue on. We've got a few more questions to examine, from OG Anunoby and his health status to Khem Birch and his overall lackluster play. That's coming up in just 1 second here. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar, who are making the best tasting protein bars money can buy. You got to check them out. They have flavors for everybody, whether you are someone who likes nuts in your bars, they have those. They also have nut free if you have an allergy. That's no problem. They've got fruit flavored ones. They've got, decadent brownie type flavors and everything in between. They've got marshmallow puffs. You can go and check out the built.com website and find the flavor that best suits your tastes and preferences. The best thing, though, that is no matter what flavor you get, you're getting something healthy that's going to scratch that itch for something indulgent without actually being all that indulgent. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein in your average Built Bar. Compare that to a regular candy bar, which has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. 30 grams of sugar is like a lot of sugar, man. You should not be eating that much sugar in a little bar. So have a Built Bar instead, and that is going to really scratch that itch. Like I said, they've got a new flavor this month. It's white chocolate cookies and cream. If it's anything like their regular cookies and cream, it's going to be delicious. So you got to get on board with that. So go to Built Bar and check out all of their wonderful flavors, and maybe find yourself a mixed box, a single flavor box, whatever it might be. You can find it at built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. That's LOCKED 15. And we continue on your first listen of the day here with Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com. We continue on our perusal of the Worry Meter with your Toronto Raptors. We'll go to the next one here. Also injury related on top of Fred VanVleet. OG Anunoby got the hairline fracture in his finger, and we are not really sure what his status is. He's not going to play tonight against the Nets, and this is a weird one. It seemed like maybe it's something he picked up before the All-Star break, could explain his struggles. But I think we've seen the last 2 games without OG in the lineup, as much as his struggles maybe had some people questioning, what's going on? Is he stagnating, et cetera, et cetera? All overreactions, of course. But I think we're seeing these last couple of games just how badly they miss him, particularly on defense. Like, he's just such a he's a ringer, right? You can throw him out there at anybody, and it's probably going to neutralize the threat. You think back to the last time the Raptors played the Hawks, and OG basically won that game with like 2 or 3 crunch time stops of Trae Young in space when Trae Young was doing the let's get someone an ISO and dance around them thing. You're not dancing around OG Anunoby the way you are poor Chris Boucher. And so how worried are you about this OG absence? It doesn't really seem like it's going to be super prolonged, but we also have no idea. We didn't think his hit pointer would be that prolonged either. So where are you at in terms of worry when it comes to OG Anunoby and his absence?
I'll put this at a 2. I think part of why that is because the Raptors obviously didn't deem it serious enough to, sort of shut him down as soon as it happened. He obviously wasn't feeling enough pain to be like, hey, this feels like something bigger. Like, he was just like, oh, my finger is a little sore, and kept playing through it. And so it seems like a very small fracture. So hopefully the timeline for recovery is pretty quick. And obviously we'll get the update later today, but we'll see. I'm not too concerned at this point. Will he miss, a week or so? Probably. But hey, I think they'll be okay with him missing that much time compared to, maybe a worst case scenario.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's like a 2.5 for me. Obviously the longer he's out, the worse it gets. And it sucks that he's out against this run of really important opponents that are right behind them in the standings. But I think, I'm actually kind of, I don't know what to say, like unworried, but like there's like a piece I get when I think of him coming back in a week, because it seems like he kind of fixes a lot of the ills that have been going on. Obviously, he's not going to account for a 59-point deficit over the course of 2 games. They're not winning those games if they simply just have OG playing regular OG basketball. But I do think like he shores things up so much on the defensive end. And like I think really I've been making this point all season long, and I think it really kind of bore out in these last 2 games, is that the Raptors are the kind of team that they're either in the middle of a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop. And once you get in that negative feedback loop, it's really hard to get out of it, because you are giving up easy buckets, and you're not getting anything in the half court, and you're not getting back and forcing transition with your really sort of harrowing half court defense. You're allowing transition buckets. It's just like this sort of, oh God, we're down by 30 now. There's nothing we can do. It's the same as when they get on a crazy run, right? And they are forcing turnovers. They're scoring on the run. They're getting back with a set defense and forcing more turnovers and getting out on the run. And they just didn't have that ingredient that OG provides, which is turnover forcing. It's that half court defense that he can kind of just swallow up anything, help anywhere on the floor, rotate to wherever you might need him. And I think he just really helps them get into that positive feedback loop as much as anybody else on the team. So I'm pretty encouraged that like once he gets back, we could see a little bit more of like the typical identity of the team that we're used to seeing. But until then, like, it's rough, man. I mean, they're not going to come across a Trae Young type again, or even a LaMelo Ball, who gave them a lot of trouble as well. But they need OG back. His defense is just so valuable. And for those who were like worried about how valuable he is during his little struggle before the All-Star break, you're seeing now just how important it is to have that dude on the floor. Let's continue on here to another player on the team before we kind of get to more team-wide concepts, and that is Khem Birch, who started, was it both games over the weekend? Yeah, he started both games. He was 0 for 3 against the Hawks and a minus 24 in 13 minutes on Saturday. Not so good. And then 18 minutes was 0 for 3 with 1 point and a minus 21 on Friday against the Hornets. Looking rough for Khem Birch, and it pains me to think about this because I love Khem Birch, and it's such a cool story. He's playing where he wants to be, and everything's wonderful, but he's looked pretty rough. I have a stat for you, and it makes me sad. So Khem Birch, around the rim this season, if Basketball Reference would cooperate, so far from 0 to 3 feet is shooting 56.6% inside 3 feet. Fred VanVleet, who is 9 inches, if you're being generous, shorter than Khem Birch, and has been noted as a not very good finisher around the rim his entire career, is shooting 65% at the rim. So Khem Birch, missing bunnies. He's got the floater game sometimes, although I feel like his numbers there have been kind of inflated from the early part of the season. I can't remember the last time he hit one of those 8-foot floaters. Feels like it's been a while. Looks slow-footed on defense. How worried are you about Khem Birch's play overall? And do you think that maybe there's an avenue here for him to be excised from the rotation, given how he's played?
The answer to that is yes. I am at a 4.5 with Khem Birch. I just think at a certain point, the story of sub 1 season is there for everyone to see. And this has just been a brutal season for Khem Birch, in and out of the lineup, unable to catch a rhythm. When he strings together a good couple games, it's usually followed up by a bad stretch of games, or he's just out of the lineup. And so I do think that you're at the point where you're looking for solutions beyond him. And the good thing is Precious Achua is figuring things out.
Yeah, and, they have 10,000 centers on the roster, so it's fine.
Yeah. Obviously, the one thing he provides that no one else on the roster can is the muscle that he's got. Obviously, he's a really strong body that the Raptors could use inside. But again, all of that is theoretical, right? It's been theoretical since the season has begun. You wish you could see the guy that finished up the season in Tampa, but at this point, it's hard to envision that actually transpiring.
Yeah, I think there's this sort of undercurrent of like Khem support among Raptors fans, observers, etc. Where it's like, oh, Khem should just be starting, and things work so much better with him. He's like a connector. He's this sort of guy who you can work in the short role, etc. I just don't see it. Like, I know that their numbers might be all right when he's on the floor, with the starters and whatnot. I don't think he offers anything super dynamic, and I think his defense leaves a lot to be desired. And you see it, like Precious Achua comes in, and instantly it's, oh, he's swallowing up things at the rim and in space that Khem Birch just doesn't have the foot speed to get to. And look, and so this is a roundabout way of saying, like, I think Khem Birch is playing poorly. I'm worried about his play in particular for him, but for the team, I'm at like a 1.5 because I don't think you need to be relying on Khem Birch, right? And so I don't think they'll be shy to move on and say, all right, let's go Precious or let's go small ball Thad at the 5 or whatever that might be. Like, I think there's enough options you can throw in there. And yeah, there'll be some opponents that come around who are difficult. They've played their Nuggets games, so they're done with Jokic, I think. Or they have one more maybe on the road in Denver. But, I don't know if there's going to be that many times where it's like, oh, Khem Birch, we got to have him in the lineup today for this specific matchup. And so, I feel like Precious can kind of guard anybody that Khem Birch is guarding well anyway, right? Like, he's just been that good defensively. So worried about Khem, and I want him to kind of get right and hope that he's doing all right and hope he can kind of figure things out here. But I don't think they're beholden to playing Khem to the point that it's to be worried about as like a thing that could drag down the season, because you just play somebody else there, and maybe that opens up a spot for a rotation player who offers something like shooting to the lineup, Yuta Watanabe. But that's besides the point. Let's continue.
And that guy
here.
is again
Sorry,
theoretical.
No, I was going to theoretical. Yeah. Slightly less maybe, but also, yeah, it's all just a figment of our imaginations as we're learning here.
Hopefully Khem is one of those guys that, just absolutely hates the mask, and that is contributing in some way to what we're seeing.
I also absolutely hate the mask. Not one of Jim Carrey's better vehicles. Let's continue on. We're actually going to, we can do one more here before we hit a break. So how worried are you, Vivek, about the Raptors half-court offense? It looked like doo-doo over the weekend. Really, really rough. Pascal Siakam, I think, was kind of a big contributor to that. And I don't even know if that's necessarily like a slight on Pascal. He's just seeing a lot of attention, and teams seem to know what to do with him and what the Raptors are trying to do through their offense. It seems like the All-Star break offered ample time for scouting of what the Raptors do and the 3 or 4 ways in which they really excel. If you take those 3 or 4 things away, things get pretty tricky. So overall, what are your thoughts on the half-court offense? It has been obviously a tricky point of contention all season long. They've been performing above their overall offensive talent because of their, knack for winning on the margins, the possession game, getting out in transition, etc. Seems like the half-court issues are rearing their ugly head again now that OG's not there for spacing and Gary Trent Jr. is not quite shooting fire from his fingertips like he was a month ago. Where are you at with the overall health of the half-court offense?
I would say, this is probably a 1.5 for me.
Okay.
Relative to what they've been all season, right? Like when I look at the issues that have cropped up these last 2 games, those don't worry me in terms of going forward. Pascal Siakam, I'm not worried about him, getting back to an all NBA level once he's completely done with this sickness that he's been dealing with. And so I think he's obviously the biggest part of that. I think Gary Trent is going through a little bit of an adjustment where I do think teams are showing him more respect. And, he's obviously become a bigger part of the scouting report, having that bonkers stretch that he did in tying DeMar DeRozan's record with those 30-point games. It will do that. And so I think he's going through a little bit of an adjustment, but I do think he's a good enough player to get past that. Maybe the one big worry would be Fred's knee, right? If he doesn't have the burst that he's had for the remainder of the season, then that vaults all the way up. But in terms of all the process concerns, I would say I'm not too concerned about them returning to the level they've generally been at on the season.
I'm with you. I think, you're going to get a cold shooting spell from time to time from a Gary Trent Jr. or whoever, but usually that's going to kind of snap back. There'll be regression to the mean. Look, in January, I think they were the number 2 team in the league in 3-point percentage. That's not going to be what you can expect each month, but I do think because their high volume guys are all actually very good shooters, like if they have OG, Fred, and Trent available, I think they've got enough to squeak out a pretty good half court offense with everything that Siakam's been doing, with their gaming the margins on the offensive glass, and with Scotty Barnes also. We haven't really talked about him. He had 28 points on Friday. Looked pretty damn good. He can offer you some stuff in the half court as well. So honestly, the thing that I'm kind of intrigued by is how do they get their transition game back on track? Because I didn't think that was a strength of their game in these last couple games. The turnovers, trying to get that quick hit ahead to the guy sealing out under the basket. Teams have figured that the hell out, man. And maybe it's a little bit more difficult because OG's not been in the position to run that play the last couple of games, because that's kind of his pet set where he bursts out and all right, let's hit him under the basket and we can get a quick score here. But they've just looked really sloppy in transition to me, and I think that is kind of the bigger concern than the half court offense, which is always going to have its ups and downs. But if you're not scoring on the run when that's kind of everything that you're built on, that's going to be a big time problem. So yeah, I think I'm more concerned about the transition than I am the half court at the moment, and I'm actually not that concerned about the transition because they've been really good at it all season long. And I also feel like, yes, maybe they've been scouted a bit, but Nick Nurse is a pretty damn good coach at this part of the job, which is adjusting in season. I think he does a really excellent job of, hey, this thing is happening. Maybe I need a couple games to kind of sort through it, but we'll eventually get those gears back in and lock in again. I kind of think that's what we should expect here as he adjusts to the readjustment to the Raptors over the last little while here. We're going to finish this out with a couple more. How worried are you? By the way, I'm like a 2.5, 2 on the half court offense. I did not give my number. It's very important to the integrity of the pod. We'll continue on though and round it out with a couple more. How worried are yous? But first, want to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline, they are wonderful people who have an endless number of odds, totals, player performance props, etc. for your betting needs, whether you are a football fan, and that's over now, but you can still put money down on futures and things like that. But you've also got basketball in full steam, and you've got pro and you got college hoops. Sorry, you're written March Madness right around the corner. So go to BetOnline. They remain the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, and eventually baseball in maybe 2026, whenever the owners decide to get off their asses. Anyway, head to the website today, use your mobile device, and learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. And we round out the Worry Meter episode of Locked On Raptors with Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com with a couple more How Worried Are Yous. The first one here is the state of the defense. How worried are you about how the Raptors have played defense this last little while? The Hornets, they're a good offensive team. They carved the Raptors up as such. LaMelo Ball was just dancing around. He didn't even have a crazy overall production game. It was more Terry Rozier and their bench just completely bludgeoning the Raptors. But they really struggled to keep in front of guys, and that is a problem and not something they've usually really struggled with. How concerned are you about the state of the defense right now, especially as it comes to the half court and guarding those sort of slippery guards that have given them trouble these last couple of games?
I would probably say it's a 3 because that's kind of the way it's been all season, where you've seen really good stretches, you've seen really bad stretches. And so landing right in the middle feels about fair. Well, I guess in that case I should be at a 2.5. But I feel like there are obvious concerns in the way the Raptors have defended around the rim. Then you look at the concerns with those kickouts to the corners that get a lot of threes. And so I don't think those issues are going away anytime soon. You mentioned the Raptors losing a bit of their transition game. It's hard to be in transition when the ball's just going in the basket every single time. So I think some of that will obviously dissipate, and it's a bit of an adjustment with OG out and cobbling together a bit of a different rotation. The concerns that have been there all season continue. But I'm not overly concerned that it's going to just completely fall apart now, the rest of the way or in the postseason.
Yeah, I'm at like a 2, I think. And that's because I'm not super worried about OG. I was also at like a 2 with his absence. And I think he comes back, things kind of slide back into place. Pascal obviously has been like one of their, if not their best defender over the last couple months. You'd have to imagine that being sick over the weekend probably contributed to that a little bit. And I feel like defense is kind of like a thing where you gotta sort of get on the same page all over again after taking 10 days off, right? That feels like maybe the thing that catches up a little bit later. Their offense hasn't cut up either, but I think their defense, like, I feel really good about the ceiling of their defense. And we've always known that the floor is there to fall out as well because of the way that they play and the way they bait teams into taking favorable shots, maybe through not so favorable players, but those can come back to bite you in the form of Marcus Smarts and things like that kind of explode. So yeah, the overall integrity of the defense hasn't really changed all that much to me. Obviously, if Fred is going to be limited at the point of attack, that's a problem, but I think they have other ways to kind of counteract that if they need to. And so, yeah, I'm at like a 2 with the defense. They are still long and athletic, and they still try really hard, even though that didn't really come to bear in the last couple games. I think overall, they have not forgotten how to try really hard, and that is good for a lot on the defensive end. And there's stretches where they really do kind of get going. And we saw this, I think, in the start of the second quarter, late first quarter against the Hawks. Like, they can really get ahead of steam going when that defense is cooking. And I do think that's going to be their avenue to improving and getting back on track here. And I think they have the wherewithal to do it. Let's lastly go to the final how worried are you from today's episode. And that is, how worried are you about the Raptors' ability to achieve a successful end of the season? This probably requires us to both state what our vision of success for this team is by season's end, which maybe we haven't yet sorted out. But how worried are you about right now your Raptors at 32-27? What is it? 23 games to go. How concerned, how worried are you that they will not be able to have a fruitful end of this 2021-22 season?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer, that unless there's like some type of blockbuster trade at the deadline, or there's just a major injury during the season, that I revert to what did I expect coming into the season. And so coming into the season, I was, hey, somewhere in that play-in range, 7 to 10, and hopefully get into the first round of the playoffs. They are absolutely on course to do that. I would be shocked if that didn't happen at this point. And so, yeah, I'm not concerned at all that they'll meet expectations. So, yeah, I'll put this at a 0 or a half. Maybe things look ugly like we discussed with the first scenario presented. But, yeah, with this one, it's a 0 to a half for me.
I told you we were going to de-escalate from the very beginning all the way down to the end, and there's a reason this one is last. My answer to this is a big fat 0, just not concerned at all, because everything is already gravy, man. Like, yeah, if they like really, really the wheels completely fall off and they end up 11th, then I think you can look, okay, that's a big disappointment considering where they were at the point in the season at which they were in that spot. That would be a huge disaster. But that doesn't seem very likely to me. They're better than that. Their schedule is pretty easy down the stretch. They finished with 8 of 10 at home, which is a pretty nice way to go out. Like, that's not even on the table as a possibility for me. And so you factor in the fact that Scotty Barnes looks better than anyone expected he would still. It's easy to take for granted now that he's like this, guy who's putting up 28 and stuff and scoring whenever he wants in ISO and whatnot. Like, that was not expected coming in. It's all gravy with Scotty Barnes, and he is the most important part of this whole picture. The second most important part of this picture is probably Pascal Siakam, and he's been ridiculous this season. He's kind of reached a new level. Yeah, the last couple games have been rough, but there's been explanations for that, and I don't think it's going to stick around. He looked better in stretches against the Hawks as well than he did against the Hornets. You can see the progression there. I'm not concerned about Pascal. And then, the argument I've been making all season long is that, yeah, maybe the bench is kind of letting things down. The infrastructure to support the best players is not quite in place. We're seeing this with Fred VanVleet, of course, and the overtaxing of him and his burden. But the guys who matter the most about the future of this team, in addition to Scotty and Pascal, OG, Gary Trent Jr., and Fred VanVleet, all have taken steps forward, some enormous steps forward. And that's the stuff that really matters for this season. That is what was going to make this season a success all the way. Are we going to have a clear picture as to what the overall state of the, Vision 6'9" and everything is by season's end? Maybe they, pivot out of that and sort of go with a more traditional team building thing next year after trying it out for this year. That's possible, but I don't think that is tied to the success of the season or the lack thereof or whatever. Like, that's just part of the fact-finding mission that this season was. So yeah, I'm at a full 0. I'm not worried at all, because all of the stuff that you really, really wanted to happen or hoped it happened or dreamed would happen has already happened, and it's fine. They're 32-27. They're 4 games away from hitting their Vegas over-under already. It's not that bad, despite the last couple games feeling like enormous kicks to the genitals. Anyway, with that, we've reached the end of the worry index. Do you have anything to add onto that rant there, Vivek? I find it's so easy to get like super toxic and angry after a couple of losses. It's nice to ground yourself. And sorry if I got a little excited whilst grounding myself.
Yeah, I mean, fans are going to live and breathe every single moment of this team, every single game. That's just how passionate the Raptors fan base is. But yeah, at a certain point, you got to be able to step back and appreciate everything that's happened over the course of the season. And as you highlighted, there's been way too many positives at this point for it to be viewed as a negative outcome. So yeah, I don't really have much to add to all that you put out there.
Yeah, talk to me in 2 weeks if they have still yet to pick up a win post All-Star. Then maybe we can reevaluate. We'll do a whole new version of the worry meter where everything is just a big fat 5. But we can leave it there for now. I should note, usually we handle the due to the game after game recap episodes. We haven't done it for a while, obviously, because the All-Star break is happening. But I mean, Scotty Barnes, the due to the game on Friday, the only guy who really showed up, 28 points on 13 of 18. That was fun. I would say Saturday, Precious Achiuwa was very clearly the dude of the game and their best player on the floor. Any disagreements there? Any quick thoughts on Scotty and Precious's efforts over the weekend?
No disagreement whatsoever. Scotty really encouraging with his offensive game on Friday night. It's really impressive how polished his game around the basket is. I mean, obviously there's some things that he has to get better at, but some of those finishes around the rim, like for someone who was called a 0 level scorer, it's pretty damn awesome. And then Precious Achiuwa, like, you know what? I'm gonna coin the term the Goldilocks equilibrium, and you go through a phase where you have guys like Precious who are trying to do too much. Maybe you got a guy like Yuta Watanabe that's doing too little. Precious looks like he's getting closer to just doing things just right. And I think that's the biggest thing for him.
Yeah, Precious Achiuwa plays like the polar opposite of a bowl of oatmeal, but it actually works out as an analogy. So well done, Big V. We will wrap up the show there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully all of your alarms in your house are not firing off anymore, and you can kind of, take a sort of bigger scale view of the season as a whole. After these last couple tough losses, I would expect probably a better effort against the Nets tonight. It helps that the Nets are not complete. They won't have Kyrie yet because I think their vaccine mandates don't lift until March the 7th. Boy, words hard. But we will examine that game on tomorrow's episode of the podcast. We'll obviously preview the second half of the back-to-back as well. But until then, you can find us wherever you find good social media, I guess, at Vivek Jacob. Do you have anything you would like to promote, Big V?
Yeah, I'll have a story coming out for Raptors.com on, the rigors of an 82-game season. And especially, these types of seasons where there's more external factors impacting it than in a normal 82-game season. So you can look forward to that. And besides that, just the usual stuff at Raptors.com, CBC Sports. You can follow me on Twitter at Vivek M. Jacob.
Sounds good, buddy. I'll have the recap on Raptors HQ of the game tonight. I'll be at the game tomorrow, too. Going to a game for the first time in quite a while, which is very exciting. So you'll have that. And we got a full week of lots of games to dig into over the course of this 6 games and 8 night stretch. And we look forward to bringing all that action to you over the course of the week. And thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. Go and now listen to Locked on NBA, as every single night they are covering all of the big games from the night before. A great little recap if you did not catch all the games. So make sure you're still informed on what's going on around the NBA. So go check that out on both the podcast platforms and on YouTube for free. And with that, we will talk to you again on Tuesday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Bye-bye.